Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back for another weekly conversation with a children's literature author. This week, I'm talking with Anika Aldamuy Denise. Anika writes books that plant seeds of inspiration in readers of all ages. She writes stories that sprout from her heart and often feature people and characters bursting with spirit, pride, and my favorite, moxie. She's written multiple award-winning picture books for children, and today we're talking about one of her nonfiction titles, Phenomenal AOC, The Roots and Rise of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Anika, welcome to the KidLit Love podcast. I'm so glad to talk with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Ah, well, as I mentioned before we got started, nonfiction picture books are kind of my favorite. They're one of my favorite genres. I love them. I love learning new facts. I love learning about new people, new places, and the craft that goes into it as well. So I'm really excited to jump into today's conversation. But of course, I want us to start at the beginning with you. So if
Mhm.
you could introduce yourself and your books and your writing and all the things to listeners to kick us off.
Happy to. Um, I'm Anika, and I write, as you mentioned, nonfiction picture books. I do also write fiction picture books. I have a handful of those as well. Um, in recent years, though, I've sort of gone down that rabbit hole of nonfiction because I also love to read and write about real people. And I hadn't ever thought about writing a picture book biography until I read the book Swan by Laurel Snyder. Do you know that one?
I don't. I am writing it
It's
down.
it's an older title now, but it's about the um ballerina Anna Pavlova, and it's her life story. And it's illustrated. Who is the illustrator? Oh my gosh, I know. Oh, Julie Morstad is the illustrator. And it's just so lyrical and so beautifully paced and so moving. I had never seen a picture book like it. It really made me, first of all, her life is amazing. It made me want to know more. And it was such a gorgeous piece of art, you know? And so I read it and I thought, I didn't have anyone in mind. It sent me into love for the genre. And of course, then I read a ton more, and it felt like there were just some really beautiful books coming out in that category. I remember Josephine, about Josephine Baker, was like groundbreaking. And it lit something under me, and I kind of tucked it away for later. And then I was walking through the main branch of the New York Public Library, and there was an exhibit. I think it was called "The ABCs of It: Why Children's Books Matter." So it was a whole
Oh,
exhibition on children's books, and I happened to
I
be in
would
New
have
York.
loved it.
You would love it. It's Leonard Marcus. In fact, he's got another exhibition that he's curated, and I think it might be. I don't know if it's in New York or Chicago or what, but um, he is an incredible historian of children's literature and author himself, and um, in partnership with the public library, put together this incredible show, a lot of books and manuscripts from their archives, and just really cool exhibit design too. Like you could walk through this almost the set of Goodnight Moon. There was an Alice in Wonderland exhibit. And then I turned the corner and there is an exhibit for Pura Belpré, who was the first Latina librarian to work at the New York Public Library. And I had her book, Perez and Martina, when I was a child, but I hadn't seen that edition of it that they had displayed in years. And I almost cried because I was like, oh, I remember that book. It was, very, very much a part of my memories. And then the reading the Laurel Snyder Swan and seeing that exhibit and seeing the photograph of Pura reading to kids, just that was the moment that sparked the idea that this is who I want to do my very first picture book biography about. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't really know how to do it. But I knew that I wanted to. So that's what kind of brought me into nonfiction, and I've been doing more and more of that. So that was a really long introduction, but yeah, so that's what got me there. And then, I enjoy writing about luminary women. And I happen to have written about 3 Puertorriqueñas because as I share that identity. And so it's kind of become my thing.
Yeah. I love that at first you said you just kind of tucked it away,
Mhm.
and then you had that moment where you realized, okay, this is where I want to go. And I could envision what that must have been like. Now I have to go research these kinds of exhibits and find all of these things for myself. But I always just love knowing that moment, that thing, that experience that just sparked the writers to go into the direction that they did. So I'd love for you to mention a little bit more about those titles. We know, well, I know planting seeds. I know the titles, but go ahead and tell us, those titles, and then we'll jump into your most recent one, Phenomenal AOC. But plug them all.
Okay, thank you. So the first one, Planting Stories, the life of librarian and storyteller Pura Belpré, is obviously about Pura Belpré. She was not just a librarian, not I shouldn't say just. Librarians are like
Right.
superheroes, but she wasn't only in her work a librarian, she was also a writer. She wrote the first mainstream press Latino storybook in the United States. She came from Puerto Rico. She got hired as an assistant at the library, and was a rising star there. She did incredible work with puppets and bilingual story time. So her life story is rather incredible. So she was a great first subject to write about. There was so much to discover about her. Um, and that book, that's a kind of, I guess I just learned how to write a picture book biography on that one, but I was obviously drawn to very lyrical texts. And I
Mhm.
mentioned Swan. And so I really tried to capture that. And that's a hard thing to get someone's life, down to this economy of language and make it without, losing something and without
Yeah.
feeling like something was missing. So I learned that on that book, I learned that I would kind of point the lens at a certain part of someone's life. Like it doesn't have to be what we call cradle to grave, I guess. I know that sounds weird, but um, that if I really focused on the moment she leaves Puerto Rico and arrives in New York City and kind of really spans her career, but I have a narrative frame there that I stuck to, and that made that work. But after that, I was like, I was hooked, and who would I write about next? And I think I'm trying to remember what the moment was for me for my next picture book biography, which is a girl named Rosita. Um, and that's about Rita Moreno. And I think she was um like I saw her on be interviewed or something. And I remembered the time that I met her, which is a funny story. I met Rita because she was in upstate New York. I have family up there, and we were visiting. I had very little kids. They were like 5 and 6, you know. And they were swimming off my aunt and uncle's dock. They invited us over to swim, and my aunt said, "Oh, I have to tell you, Rita Moreno's coming over." And I just looked at her like, "What?" Explain this to me. And she said, "Oh, she's in town for the Saratoga at the Saratoga Performing Arts Center. There was I think the New York City Ballet does their gala there, or they did at the time in the summer. And um they knew someone who worked for the Performing Arts Center and was like the event planner, and they wanted Rita to be able to get out on the lake and to take her for a boat ride and, just show her the area because it's such a beautiful area." And so called my aunt and said, "Hey, you have a boat? can you can you take Rita and her husband out?" So she said she's going to be here soon. You just stay on the dock. You can keep swimming. We're going to go for a boat ride with Rita. And I'm thinking to myself, I like Rita's an icon, she was also a part of my childhood. I remember watching her on The Muppet Show and The Electric Company, right? And also being like, not that many um women in Hollywood, not that many Puerto Rican women in Hollywood, right? To that were at her level. So she's someone that we always sort of rooted for, right? And we knew her from West Side Story, and my dad, huge fan of Rita's. So it was just funny. Like it was so unexpected. And then she came walking down the the path, and she looked gorgeous, of course. She was in this beautiful sundress, and she was so warm and so friendly. And I think I managed to like say 4 words. I was so starstruck. And it was such an unexpected encounter. And of course, I'm in my bathing suit with like peanut butter and jelly sandwich stuck to me, like, because I've been with the kids all day. And I shook her hand, and off they went. And I was like, I wish I had said more to her, I wish I had told her that and I'm sure she hears it all the time, but I was in the performing arts. In fact, where I was in Lake George, New York, I used to do summer camp, a summer theater up there every summer. So she was really a role model. We did West Side Story. We did that show. So all this stuff I didn't say, of course. Probably good that I didn't, because she would have been like, "Oh, why is she rambling on and on?" But anyway, I guess that's how the two, again, it was like two moments meeting. It was all the things I wish I had said to her, and then seeing her again and thinking, "Oh, wow, she would also make a fantastic subject for a picture book." So, that's it. It's like this spark moment, like you said, like something clicks. And I love it when that happens, right? Because it's just, you're onto something. And sometimes it's not easy. You have to try to do many drafts, but there is that moment where you're like, "Oh, this could be good." So that was my second book.
Did you get to redeem yourself and talk to her again, or, in the process of writing the book?
I did. Well, it's so funny. We really fast tracked that book. The illustrator, and I should mention the illustrators. Oh, I'm sorry that I didn't, because the illustrator of Planting Stories is Paula Escobar, and the illustrations are so gorgeous, like blow you away, right? Kind of how I felt when I saw Swan is how I felt when I opened up, but that file when they send you the first sketches or the first color work, and I just, was so thrilled. And um she deserves all the awards for for her incredible work. And the illustrator for A Girl Named Rosita is Leo Espinosa, and um, he was able to do the book very quickly on request because we had heard that West Side Story, the remake was coming out, the one Steven Spielberg did, and marketing thought, oh, wouldn't it be great for this book to come out, alongside the film, um, for like extra visibility and tie-in and all that. Turns out it was COVID time, so the film was delayed, and our book still came out, so it didn't, so it came out ahead of the film. Um, but because of that very condensed timeline, I didn't actually speak to Rita until we were well into production on it. Like Leo was already doing the illustrations, but we did send her, we sent her proofs, and I wanted her blessing, obviously, and then when the book came out, we sent it to her, and she actually took a picture with it on Instagram and posted it and said how much she loved it. And I have since spoken to her. Coincidentally, my cousin was at an event with her. She was speaking at some women in business event, and my cousin walked right up to her and said, you know my my cousin. And so we have actually talked about like us getting together and possibly doing an event at some point in
Oh,
the future,
definitely.
which would be great. But she's very busy. She's still, I think she's 91 now, I think, or she's definitely
Wow.
90. And she's everywhere. She's in films and she's working, and she just does not slow down. So she's amazing. So if I can get Rita to slow down and come meet me in New York, I would love that.
Oh, oh, I just love that. I
Yeah.
you have some connected family members or some family members in the right places.
I don't even like, how is that possible? It's so funny. It's a big family. That's what it is. So
Well, I love
we
it.
have a big family. They're everywhere. Yeah.
So tell me then, because the book we're talking mostly about today is Phenomenal AOC.
Mhm.
Tell me, what was that spark? How did this book come to be?
That really, the credit to my editor, who is a fan, lived in her district, and actually lived at one point in Park Parkchester, where she grew up. Well, she was born, and in that area of the Bronx. And my editor is at HarperCollins. It's Luana Hori, and I work mostly with Nancy and Telly, another editor there who is amazing. We worked on the first two picture book biographies together, and Luana and Nancy worked very closely. And so I guess Luana said, I really want to do a book about AOC. And I got an email from Nancy saying, wait, you grew up in Queens, right? And I said, yeah, why? And she said, well, we're thinking of how would you feel about maybe writing about AOC? And I had actually thought about it. There was another book about her. I think that's the only reason why I shied away at first, because a book called The ABCs of AOC, I think that's published through Penguin. And it was really, just a charming book. Um, a different kind of feel, obviously, kind of more of a concept book. Um, but I thought, maybe there's they said it, and I said, let me think about it. And then um that's what happens. And I get it in my head and I go down the research rabbit hole.
Yes,
And
I love rabbit holes.
me too. Me too. And I love the research, and I've come to realize that I really do love the research part. It's You have to kind of know when to get out of the rabbit hole, because you could spend forever researching, and you have to think, okay, now I better go write it. But yeah, so I just thought, I love this book. I love the ABCs of AOC, but there probably is room for one that's just more narrative, right? So So we went for it. And again, it was a quicker turnaround, I think, because I believe she was running. I mean, she'd been primaried that year, and there was that chance, like, I mean, she's kind of unstoppable, unbeatable. Like, I couldn't even imagine it, but they thought, well, the election is coming up. We're going to want to get it out before then. So I've done two books on a much faster track than the first one was, which is good in a way because it really makes you focus and put that time limit on your research. And so in both instances, like I didn't get to even interview AOC. Like yes, she was campaigning. It was a really kind of wild time. It was COVID time, and um politically there was a lot going on. But you contact people in her office, and you have no shortage of firsthand, for sources, because of how much she's been filmed, and you can see hours of her talking on CNN or whatever. But I felt that I could, that's always the dilemma. Like, can you do these books without talking to the person? Should you do the book without talking to the person? It's always ideal if you can, and you can't always. But in both cases, I just made sure my research was impeccable, and um, that I do justice to the story, Um, so that's how that happened. It was really, for me, I felt uh, she's a lot younger than me, but I felt very connected to her story. She grew up, she was born in the Bronx. She had a very close relationship with her father. Um, that's my story also. I grew up in Queens, hardworking parents who really tried to give me more than they had, So I really recognize that in her story too. And even when I was saying I used to go upstate, that's I lived in Queens, and it wasn't like her story where, her parents then moved to Westchester, and, in a small house. But what my parents would do was send me to live with my grandmother for the summer to kind of get me out of New York, and
Yeah.
get me reading and doing camps and doing things like that, so that I wouldn't get in trouble in long summers. I was a latchkey kid, right? So I would have a lot of time by myself, and they really wanted me um, to have that experience. So there are all these parallels. Even when she lost her dad, I mean, my dad had passed, a few years before, and I just felt this connection with her. I understand what it's like to be the woman of color, young in the room. Um, I know what it's like to have to feel like you have to prove yourself and be more prepared, and more articulate. And, it's just like, I think as a woman, I think any woman really can kind of relate to that story. But as a young woman of color in this environment where, n- she shows up in a way that not a lot of people can or do, or you know I do think she's phenomenal. No matter what you think of her politics or anything, like, she really is a leader, and she really is an unapologetic, strong female leader. So I think her story is so worth knowing.
It is. And as I mentioned when we were recording before, I live in New York. I'm actually less than 10 minutes away from Lake George, so we've got that connection right there.
Oh, yay!
Yeah. And I'm in New York. However, I did not know this woman's story. I did not know. And so as I'm reading this book, I did go down the most wonderful rabbit hole. And that's what I love about nonfiction picture books, especially Because if you learn something new or about someone new, and then you take it to your actual life, well, let me Google this, let me look this up. I listened to one of her campaign videos and was just mesmerized by, like you said, the spirit. You say you write books with, pride and spirit and moxie, and all three of those things were evident in this video. And like you said, regardless of what your political beliefs are, you can just feel the passion and the power of this woman who wants to do good. And it just came through in the pages of the book, and then in my rabbit hole, it came through in the pages of learning about her. And I think, again, regardless of anybody's views, this is a role model
Mhm.
for someone to know, right? If they're not, and that's what I love about books, that role model might not be right next to you, but in a book, it is. And knowing these stories, oh, it just makes so much feel possible and feel good. And I got that feeling throughout this whole book, which is just a wonderful way to feel in the first place. But then, I don't give away spoilers, but you've got this beautiful kind of full circle nature to the book. And I'm so glad you talked earlier about how you choose to structure it, because you could do a beginning to end, although not really, because that's really impossible to do in 32 pages or less. And so I loved, the opening, and the very opening pages, you capture her, from her clothes to her earrings to the lipstick, and here she is, look at her go. She's she's shocking some people and she's doing some things, and then you go back. And then we
Yeah.
get the story and we see the family and we see the hard work, and we see all of it. And then we see at the end this just kind of beautiful full circle moment. I think the last spread, not the author's note that comes at the end, which we'll talk about, but that last spread just had my heart. I loved it because you had both sides on there. So you're right, we probably should mention this illustrator as well.
Yes, yes, I was just about to.
Absolutely gorgeous photo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Loris Lora, and, when we were looking for illustrators for the book, I people may or may not know that, I don't choose the illustrator. I have a consultation, but, and I'm very fortunate, that my editors that I work with and art directors always bring me in and say, "What are you thinking?" And so we were looking at artists, and Luana sent me a screenshot or something of Loris's Instagram, and she had I think it was a portrait of John Leguizamo, and she had a few other celebrity portraits on there, and they were very stylized, but very much captured the essence of the person. And I like flipped. I'm like, there she is. Oh, please, please let her say yes to the book. You know what I mean? I was like,
Another one of those moments.
yeah, I was like, oh, she would be so good, so good. And we just knew, like, the minute I opened that email and then went, and then I stalked her Instagram. um I just knew she was going to do a fantastic job, and she really gets the spirit of AOC, from her, just the tilt of her head, or the posture, obviously her clothes, everything. I love it. And I love that it is slightly stylized too. It's not it just it works. I think it's very accessible to a young reader, and yet captures the essence of this woman.
I
So,
agree.
yeah.
I was thinking that as I was reading that balance, and I thought, it looks, so effortless and beautiful on the page, but my goodness, what must have went into capturing that spirit and the idea of this person in a way that is so inviting to a young child in a picture book.
Mhm.
Like you said, you could still see the emotion. The eyes, I don't know how the eyes represent so much in here, just the tilt or the way that they look. You are definitely brought into the book. I think that last page, as I said, was my favorite, but my second favorite was just a few pages before, um, where she kind of gets the call, like, yes, I'm going to do this. And there is her just standing so beautiful and so proud. And then all of the people, kind of moving into the other page that she is alongside and representing. And it's this
Yeah.
feeling of community on the page. That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
You just can't help but not
Yeah.
feel that.
It's one of my favorites too. I love that you pointed out that when I think it was Luana's favorite too,
Really.
our editor. Yeah, it's just beautiful, and Lourdes does so much incredible work with color and drawing your eye, across the spread. Um, she's masterful. That's someone who really understands picture book making. And when those two things come together, like when the text feels just right, and you get someone like Lourdes doing her thing, uh, picture books really sing. And also structurally, this was fun to do because even though I don't do, cradle to grave, and I might, point my lens at certain points of someone's story, so far until now, everything had been kind of linear, and this was a chance to drop readers right in to that moment she's being sworn in, which was a big moment. And then jump back. So that was really fun. And like you said, then it's also a circular structure. It comes back. So that I learned something about, writing picture book biographies. It was another
Yeah.
thing in my toolbox of really thinking in some ways like a filmmaker.
Mhm.
In fact, I taught a workshop on this, like using filmmaking techniques or a filmmaker's sort of perspective or brain, and putting that into like almost like a documentary filmmaker, right? And putting that into your picture book biography. So that's how I did that, and I was pleased with it. I think it made for a more satisfying reading experience. So
It was a definite satisfying reading experience.
thank you.
I also love that you included, and I want to make sure I mention it because not only is it in the back of your book, but you have some really great resources on your website as well. That you have these couple of pages um, that talk about lessons, right?
Mm,
5 lessons for change makers, like right straight out of her playbook.
yeah.
Um, that I would say kids and adults could learn and embrace, and also um, language of the possible, where you define some important terms. I think that's my favorite title now for a
Yeah.
glossary in the back of a
Yeah.
book is
Oh,
language
that.
of the
Yeah.
possible.
Yep. That came from there was an article written, I believe, in the Atlantic about and I think it was called Party of the Possible, which is, comes out of progressive speak in some ways. And so when Luana said to me, I don't want to call it a glossary. She said, we can't call it after all this like powerful language, we can't
Yeah.
call it a glossary. So I pitched Language of the Possible, and she was like, love it.
Yeah.
And she's so fearless. She's such a fearless editor. She was so game. She was so down for everything. I was like, it was so fun to work with her. And even like like we were talking about the back matter, and we just didn't want it to be, your expected back matter. I don't know. I would love to know from teachers and librarians, like if they read the back matter with kids and they're reading it in a classroom setting. Some kids, I know my kids, especially my oldest, was like a nonfiction head. Like she loved any nonfiction. So she was the kid who was reading every word of the back matter. But sometimes you think, does it get skipped?
Yeah.
So we wanted to do something with it that felt, first of all, tonally like the rest of the book.
Mhm.
Sometimes you get these like amazing texts, and then you get to the back matter and it changes a little bit and it goes into so straightforward, and we didn't want that. We wanted it to seem seamless. So we start out with a very short, well, we start out with a quote, and this is something that she said at the Women's March. She said, justice is about making sure that being polite is not the same thing as being quiet. In fact, oftentimes the most righteous thing you can do is shake the table. And I loved that quote. And that was actually at one point, that was the title of the book. It was going to be Shake the Table, but we decided
Oh,
it was too abstract.
right.
Um, but it wasn't bad. It would have worked.
No.
But um, and then I thought, well, what if there are these like little lessons that give you a glimpse into some of the things that she's done, that give you a snapshot rather of her political career. But they're fun and they're playful and they're bite size. And then of course we wanted to put in something about youth-led movements because that's what this book really is. Beyond being about one person, it shows the power of young people. And I think that's really inspiring for readers. So we did want to mention, things like the Sunrise Movement and Justice and Dignity for Immigrants and United We Dream and, all of that, because that's, that it is definitely, there is some a political point of view there, but they're very powerful youth movements, and I think that it's so valid to have those resources in there for the kids that want to seek them out. So, yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it is going to be our kids that change our world. So
Absolutely.
they need the inspiration and books like this to know that it is possible at a younger and younger and younger age. I think this book being such a great one to show that, she's doing things at a younger age than most of the people around her.
Absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
shows that that's, not only possible, but the thing that we probably need. So I really loved that. And as an educator that used to work with kids, I now work with teachers. That was the best moment when they read a book and you could see on their face that there was some new possibility that they were considering for themselves that they didn't before
Yeah.
that book. And so back matter like this that keeps that going, that plants that seed, that propels them forward. I read it. My kids read it, so I know we do read it out there. I'm sure there are some that skip, but it's one of my favorite pieces to see when I turn that last page and know that there's still a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah. That's good. That makes me happy to hear
Yes.
that you and your kids are reading it. Yeah. Going into this book, there was a debate going on. I remember, like, is are there too many? Is the genre of picture book biographies overdone? And I was like, I remember just being like, no,
No, no,
no
no.
way, no way, man. We need give me more, right? Like, and also give me more about um marginalized voices, right? Tell me the stories of the hidden figures. Bring them into the light. There's definitely we have not reached a saturation point. And I've also heard people say, do kids like to read picture book biographies? And some hot takes out there that are like, they don't really love them. Oh my gosh, I've had kids clutching my book to their chest and thanking me for writing it. I think it's really powerful if you are in the group where this person is that you're writing about, right? If you share identity with that person, it's such validation. And then if you're not, you're learning to view you're certainly with AOC, your leaders differently. Like ask a kid, what does a president look like? Right? What are they going to put in their head? Ask a kid after reading AOC, what does a president look like? Or what does a leader look like? Or what does a congressperson look like? And they've got a whole new
Yes.
um, image. So I think it's just never enough picture book batteries. Bring me all the. I love reading them too.
Yes.
Like you, I learned so much, um, and it's nice for me. I'm an adult reader, right? But the shorter, again, bite-sized nature is a gateway
Yeah.
to learning more. Yeah. So.
Well, and as I talk about a lot, but it's in the opening of the podcast. I truly, truly believe that all adults should still be reading children's literature for a whole bunch of reasons. And one big reason is that we all still have that little inner child, right?
Mhm.
Who wants to feel good, who wants to be something, who wants to learn. And learning about all of those things, that maybe our inner child still needs or we still need in a I would say a bite-size one sitting book that can literally change the way you feel and think in less than 15 minutes. I mean, what we need all those things that we can get in this world
Oh,
today.
that's such a good point. That's such a good point. Like you can read, it's like in 15 minutes, you can laugh, you can,
Yeah.
your curiosity can be sparked. Like picture books are powerful for that. And also just like the play between words and art. I just enjoy that so much. I think one of the things I love about picture book biographies is seeing all the different art along with it. It's not just the story. It really draws you in
Mhm. It
to a
makes it
person's
emotional,
story.
at least
Very
for
much so.
yeah, to be able to see that.
Yeah. It's a little different than, I guess, reading a longer biography, which is also amazing because that's a deep dive. But um, something about it is a little bit like watching a mini documentary, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Plus-
I'm glad that you said that earlier. It really is, because that's what happens on the page. It's usually what happens in our minds.
Mhm.
Um, so I can definitely appreciate that. So, what's next? Any sneak peeks? Any other sparks? What can you tell us?
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to tell you what's next. So it feels like a long way out, but but such as publishing, sometimes these pub dates are like, oh, this is coming, and books also take a long time too. So to write and to print and everything. But the spark of the next book for me is very different. It's a picture, like look like a picture book. Like I think it's 48 pages, but it's a poetry collection, and it's nonfiction. Um, and it's it's called La Bandera, which is the flag, right? Puerto Ricans love their flags. It's kind of a running joke. Like, how do you know someone's Puerto Rican? They have a flag on their car and outside their house and on their hat. And, we're very proud of our flags. And there's a history behind that. And it's not just that it goes beyond just pride, right? It's because for a time it was actually illegal to fly the Puerto Rican flag. It was banned. And that bit of history sparked me because I didn't know that. My father never told me that. I'm sure he knew about it, right? But it's not something it's not history that I was taught. And so I went down the rabbit hole, and I realized that the flag would be a really good way to a good catalyst for telling that the story of the island, not just about the flag, and not the full story either, but using moments where the flag was transformed or adopted could really bring some more understanding to the relationship between the US and Puerto Rico, which a lot of people sadly still misunderstand, right? How many times I'm sure have we heard people be like, why are we helping them after after Hurricane Maria? Well, we belong to the
For
United
them.
States, right? We are them, um, a territory or a commonwealth, and the truth is a colony, right? So there's some hard truths there,
Mhm.
but what strikes me is that it's not in like curriculum. We're not really teaching that. It's not something ever I learned. It's certainly it is something that you may learn in a very specific um, Caribbean studies class or something, but high schoolers are not getting this, right? And so I wanted to fill that gap, I guess. And I also wanted to learn. Like most of the things that I write about are things that I'm also curious about and want to learn more. And I was like sad that I'm like, these are my people. This is my history. Why don't I know more about this? So I went and did more research. And then because some of the topic is heavier, um, not all of it's heavy. There's some definite celebration. I mean, it's the flag, there's like
Right.
there's some lighter things in there, but I felt like poetry was a good entry into that. That if we could do a poem about each moment and then fill in the rest with prose, initially the book was going to be kind of like um, poem and then prose like intertwined, and it because of length and things like that, we have some of that, but not as much as I initially envisioned. But um, it just seemed like a way to tell that history that felt very stirring and very moving and allowed me to be kind of honest,
Mhm.
and unfiltered through a lens of poetry. So that's what it is. It's poems of resistance and pride.
Oh, I can't
Yeah.
wait. I can't
And it's
wait.
like, yeah, I mean, it's for a middle grade reader, fully illustrated. So yeah. And the illustrator is Erica Lugo, who grew up in Puerto Rico, um, lives here now, but you don't usually get to talk to your illustrator
Right.
that much unless you're married to them, which is I'm also married to an illustrator. So if he works on my books, I get to talk to him. But otherwise, but we had one exchange because she said that she read the manuscript and um it was very much obviously moving to her because of her background and her history, and um that was really important for me to hear because I didn't grow up on the island, and there is a little bit of a I think Puerto Ricans who live on the island and Puerto Ricans who live in the States it's like sometimes there can be like a little bit of tension there, right? So it was really important for me to feel that I had gotten it right. And of course, in doing so, I consulted a sensitivity reader and authenticity reads, and I went through, that's so important, right? So I went through all that, and it comes out. It was initially, when it was announced, slotted for 2025, but it looks like with schedules and everything, it's going to be 2026 in time for Hispanic Latine Heritage Month. So it's
Feel
a
like
long
it.
wait, but worth it.
Right, right. And it'll feel like it'll be here before you know it. But I love that it feels like you said you started your picture book journey in this really lyrical space, and that is what inspired you, and that is where you wanted to go. And it sounds like you're really leaning in such a beautiful way in this newest book that's coming. So I love that you've taken us through the journey from book to book to book, and not just the spark from book to book to book, but the process from each of
Yes.
them, what you've learned, and
Mhm.
seeing how that's developed. I feel like you've given us a really beautiful sneak peek into your brain and how the trajectory of your books have gone. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes sneak peeks into people's brains, mine included, can be a lot. But yeah, and I've learned so much, and I learn from every project. And the thing that I tell writers is that nothing's wasted. Even if something doesn't end up in the book, or even if a whole book ends up on a shelf, like it's all important. It's all usable. It's all teachable. Even if it's just a snippet, it might wind up in a future project. Or in some cases, like there's a lot that we had to, this editing process was very different too than the picture books. I'm very fortunate in that I've done some editing of my picture books, but those editorial letters were pretty light. This one, we really had to really think about it and go back and forth. And I had to fight for some things to stay in and give give in on some things. But I really learned how to let go, and then I thought, well, all of this that didn't make it in is going to be in my school visit presentation or be in supplemental materials for the book. You said you were on my website, like I offer that. There's for AOC, there's a change makers toolkit that kids can get. Well, of course we'll do that for this book, probably more extensively than any other book. And so I just try to remind myself that in anything, nothing is wasted.
That's a good life lesson as well as writing
Mhm.
lesson.
Yeah, yeah.
Where can listeners find you online so that they connect with you, they can know about the new things you're working on, find this book when it comes out? What's the best place?
My website, which is just anikadenice.com. And I'm in all the places, I'm on, I'd say Instagram mostly because it's just my platform of choice. I am on once in a while on what was formerly known as Twitter, but not as much anymore. And threads and all that. So, and actually, I'm on TikTok too. But I've got to get a little lesson from my kids of how to really make better TikToks.
I know. I'm in most of the places, but TikTok is just not one that I've dipped my toes into, but you're right. If you need to learn how, you just need to go to your
Just
own kid.
go to my kids. They'll help me out. But TikTok's great for bookish things, and I think Instagram is too. So, yeah, that's where you can find me. I currently have put my newsletter on hold, but I'm going to bring that back soon.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
will make sure to put links to your website and all the social places that they could find you in the show notes. And I will, of course, put links directly to all of the books that we talked about today. And I will officially invite you back so we can talk about that new one when it comes out in 2026. So maybe I'll be the first one on your calendar for your
Abs-
launch.
yes, Stephanie, I'd love to. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. So please have me back.
Oh, I will. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming today. And listeners, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.